possible that some of you came this morning expecting a sermon about gun violence. That very research-intense sermon in a rapidly changing landscape just wasn't going to happen. So it's been put off till April. You'll get to hear it then. And in the meantime, I'm going to talk about our life's purpose this morning. Years ago, someone sent me a wonderful cartoon, and I want to describe it to you. It's an Opus cartoon. It's about a penguin named Opus and his friend, a boy. And the boy in this cartoon is sitting on a hilltop watching the moon. And Opus comes by and says, "Oh, buddy, ever wonder how all this came to be?" The boy says, "You don't believe in God, Opus?" And Opus says, "I'm a penguin. We're not sure what we believe in. Except porpoise. We believe in having porpoise, and also lots of squid." The boy, literally minded as boys often are, says, "That's ridiculous. If you think this is all a cosmic accident, you're left purposeless." Opus says, "I'm not purposeless." The boy lies back on the hillside and mutters, "Yeah, well, if we're merely atoms stomping around by chance, there's little hope for finding a purpose in life." And then he falls asleep. And in the next frame, Opus puts his hat under the sleepy boy's head, covers him with his jacket, and when it starts to rain, shelters the sleeper under his umbrella, all the while saying, life's purpose. Maybe it's not so much found as made." Since you don't have time for everything, and you have to make choices among valuable, pleasurable, useful tasks, it's helpful to be clear about what you think of as your major purposes in life. Most of us have more than one. To make a contribution to our profession, or raise self-sufficient children, for instance, or to ease our parents' years, or be active in politics, or maybe all four at once. Or maybe it's students, or art, or knowledge. You know your purposes, don't you? An evangelical pastor named Rick Warren wrote a bestseller called The Purpose-Driven Church, and then individualized his ideas into a second book called The Purpose-Driven Life. These books were bestsellers, hugely popular, a cultural phenomenon, really, about 2005. And they've been reissued with study guides and so on ever since. Warren's theme turns out to be, actually, in the end, not so much about our purpose, but about God's purpose, which he finds to be easily discernible in biblical texts. In this matter, he shows a serious lack of imagination and knowledge of church history. It's manifestly possible for human beings to read the Bible and discover a nearly infinite number of purposes, all the way from killing infidels to sheltering a child under an umbrella. So the purpose-driven life is a matter, in the end, of reading about Rick Warren's understanding of God's purpose and aligning your life with it. Seriously not for you use. Warren made, though, a very important point about how we need to have a sense of purpose to live well, and the institutions we love need a sense of purpose to serve well. It's easy to forget as we rush about our lives, and he was right to remind us. But Rick Warren believed, and probably still does, that finding purpose is a simple matter of reading one's Bible correctly, that is to say, his way, and that's where Opus diverges, and that's where most UUs will also diverge. Opus the agnostic says he's not sure that he believes in God or what he believes about God, but he is sure that he has a purpose. His purpose is not found in a book, any book, but it's made out of what his life brings him and the choices he makes in dealing with what life brings him. Being kind to his fellow creatures and keeping sleeping kids warm and dry, is a part of his purpose in life, it turns out. And he goes about it at considerable sacrifice of his own comfort and time, and with considerable satisfaction. It's the sort of story someone might tell at a memorial service, when someone might stand up and take the mic and with a trembling voice say, I was with him once when he gave his coat to a cold kid and sheltered him from the rain with his umbrella. It was such a tender and loving thing to do, and that's the kind of guy he was. Opus doesn't just talk about finding a purpose, he lives his purpose, as we should also. Opus objects to the idea that his purpose is all laid out for him in someone else's book. He wants to find his own, a very UU impulse, a very American impulse, actually, a very modern impulse. Ralph Waldo Emerson perhaps put this impulse in its most classic form, protesting the idea that one's purpose and other matters of faith could be found in old texts, a la Rick Warren. Emerson was one of the founders and is still one of the best spokespersons of our Unitarian Universalist faith, and more generally was a shaper of American common sense. He said in one of his famous essays, "Why should we not have a poetry of insight and not tradition, a religion of revelation to us and not a history of revelation to them? Why should we grope among the dry bones of the past or put the living generation into a masquerade outfit of the past's faded wardrobe?" We Unitarian Universalists believe with Opus that it's our job to find and make our purpose and then to live it out in our daily lives. We gather in congregations in part to assist each other in doing just that, making a purpose and living it. Our denomination as a whole has a purpose. When congregations join the Unitarian Universalist Association, they join to affirm and promote 14 values in 7 sentences: the worth of persons, justice, equity, and compassion, the acceptance of one another, and spiritual growth, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, the use of the democratic process, the promotion of world community, peace, liberty, and justice for all, and a respect for the ecology, the interdependent web in which we all live. So when someone asks us why we UU support civil marriage as a civil right, or Black Lives Matter, or the dignity of transgender persons, we refer back to the worth and dignity of persons. When we ask ourselves what we should be teaching our children, we look to our purpose of encouraging spiritual growth, respecting our ecology, understanding how others think and feel, and accepting one another. From press releases to adult ed programs to requirements for ministry, we look to that statement of purpose over and over again. Rick Warren is right about this. A purpose is a very powerful thing. Individual UU churches have their own statements of purpose. In this church, we call our purpose our mission covenant. It's on the inside back cover of your worship folder if you want to look at it. That service reminds us of what we agree to do together as people in the church, to minister to one another in an atmosphere of welcome, acceptance, and caring, to promote spiritual, intellectual, and personal growth, to be a positive force in our larger community, among others. This statement of purpose is our rudder as we move through time and the myriad of choices that we might make as an institution. For instance, one of our purposes is to provide a dynamic religious education program for our children. To that end, 20 years ago, realizing that it was not possible to do that anymore in the dilapidated and overused RE buildings that we had, we put $1 million into building the building that our children and teachers now enjoy across the way. And because of that sentence about being a positive force in the community, we built that building with space to share, in those days with a child care center. After the child care center moved out a few years ago, that forethought put into extra storage and institutional sharing is serving us well as we put the building to use within our own community service programs like after-school tutoring and ESL. Nobody ever suggested that we use the building only for ourselves. We're driven by all of our missions. And what about you as individuals? What would you say are the sum of the purposes in your lives? Most of us will probably be aware of several. For myself, for instance, I think of purposes I cherish: to be a steadfast wife, to continue to support our young adult son, to enrich the lives of my parents. That's new this year, really, along with being a responsible caregiver of that dog I keep talking about. It's a part of my purpose in life to serve Unitarian Universalism, mostly through serving this church. But sometimes I say yes to other ways to serve our continental movement. Although that often comes in conflict with another one of my cherished purposes, which is to leave as small a footprint on an increasingly fragile ecology as I can manage. I feel considerable nudgings to do something about the climate of gun availability that has become a part of our culture, and fear both the causes and the fear that both causes it and is caused by it. And I want to know myself deeply as a child of the divine and to rest in that knowledge. There are challenges, all of them, and not one do I manage perfectly. Indeed, it's a bit embarrassing to mention them when I sometimes feel that I fall so short. What's a person who believes in leaving a small ecological footprint doing eating a frozen meal that comes not only in a disposable plate, but in a throwaway box? And what was she doing flying to California last week? And then when she was there, why didn't she use her airplane karma twice and go visit her son? And how come somebody whose great goal is to be trusting and faithful is so darn anxious and controlling all the time? You get the picture. There are a variety of reasons that we are not very comfortable looking at our life's purposes, and we don't do it too often. One is that doing so will always bring us up short, if we are honest. Not a one of us lives our values perfectly, and the several purposes that we appropriately have in our life will regularly conflict, and we'll have to make painful choices about the competition. Even when we're clear about our purposes, there's not enough time for everything. Another reason we don't look at our purpose is that we come face to face with the difficulties of living out what we believe. I value my health, I eat brownies. Short and sweet, exactly what I don't want to do. It's really easier not to think about this at all. We choose some of our life's purposes, and some just seem to choose us. We choose to become parents, hopefully, but sometimes we find ourselves parents. I have a friend who's known since she was a small girl that motherhood was not her life's purpose, but as she passed middle age, she found herself deeply in love with the parent of a young child, and willy-nilly, parenthood is now a part of her life's purpose. Many of us are starting to feel chosen by the purpose of slowing global warming. And for most of us, it's an inconvenient choosing that challenges other purposes, not to mention other pleasures that we hold dear. The combination of finding and making one's purpose is best done in quiet, pen and paper in hand. We reflect on what we value, on who we admire, on what we'd like said about us, and on what we do with our time. A perusal of our personal library, our credit card bill, and our household budget tells us a lot about what we are really living for. And when we wake up in the middle of the night, worrying, we can be pretty sure that somewhere in our worries, we can find our core life principles. We don't awaken worrying about red and green chili. We awaken in angst about our competing commitments, about our friendships, about our loved ones, about our duty, about the state of the world, and what we are supposed to be doing about it. I read once a long time ago an arresting statement that changed my relationship to insomnia forever. When you can't sleep, ask yourself why God wants your attention. If that language doesn't resonate with you, maybe this will. When you can't sleep, it's about your life's purpose, and your job is to stay awake and figure out what it means. Do tears well up in your eyes when you sit in the sanctuary? You're not alone. Let me tell you why that happens. We offer two things in worship. We offer space, and we offer input on core principles. And your tears, they tell you that something here is filling a hole that bores into your very being. In our words and songs of hope and faith, peace and goodwill, human care and the world's exquisite beauty, in the power of a gathered community, or the challenge of the world's broken places, sometimes just in the sheer fact that you have given yourself an hour in the midst of your way too full life. Your tears, whenever you notice them, point you to the things that matter most. Take it all. What you hope people will say about you at your memorial service, the contents of your checkbook, the ruminations of your sleepless nights, the surprised upwelling of tears at a few words in a hymn, the vows you've made and the duties you've undertaken, and write it down. There are very few things as powerful in our life as a statement of purpose. No self-respecting business would be without one. You shouldn't either. There's only one rule in the end about purposes, which is they will involve you, but they are not, in the end, about you. Purpose of raising a child, because life would be nice with a little replica of yourself, that's a sad and paltry purpose. Awfully hard on the child. We raise a child to assist in the great processes of human growth and love and creativity and achievement, which our child realizes because of us and in spite of us. We are conscientious workers or caring neighbors, not just because that makes our life more pleasant, but because the world turns on the myriad doings of everyday responsibilities. We give ourselves by serving on the PTO or the church board or in a political party, not just because we enjoy it or want to make the world better for our own little selves, but because through our work, the world is better, period. Even the most singular, solitary activities can be seen to have a larger than individual purpose. Cloistered nuns who never leave their convent pray for the world, and for them that is a great purpose. The artist produces a painting that pleases him and him alone, but if he does not also see himself as somehow expanding the whole of the human spirit, advancing the frontiers of creativity, he will not, in the end, have much fruit from his work. Our purposes must always be, in the end, larger than we are. However we choose or state those purposes, we should keep that in mind. It is so useful to have done this work of purpose-making and finding and stating. It helps us make decisions, bear up in difficulties, and be more effective in all the things that matter in our lives. I'm a wife, a senior minister of this church for a few more years, a citizen, a child of God, a mother and a daughter, a life on this beautiful earth, and a contributor to the love and goodness and complexity of the divine. I see it as a circle that has no real beginning or end, but it does have a flow, and that helps me make decisions about using all that time that I don't have enough of. Since I know what works for my purposes in life, the pangs of disappointment and the poignant lures of roads not taken are sweetened by the knowledge that I'm being firm in the purposes that I have chosen or which I have recognized have chosen me. And when I'm off track, those brownies come immediately to mind. Well, I have just a little bit of oomph to move me back into congruence with who I have come to realize I most deeply am, or at least someday will be. And my hope and prayer for you this morning is that you will do that sweet, hard work of discovering and making your life's purposes, writing them down and using them to live by. And for all of us, may the purposes that we most cherish bring us in the end meaning and joy.